Join Marple the Clue Crafter for Miss Marple's brilliant mystery solutions.
In the shadowed halls of Eldridge Manor, a single gunshot shatters the night. Sir Reginald Eldridge, a man of wealth and secrets, is found dead in his locked study. A pistol at his feet, a cryptic note pleading, "Forgive me." Suicide, or something far more sinister. Why was the window open, yet the ground untouched? Who was the mysterious woman heard arguing moments before the fatal shot? Enter Hercule Poirot, the brilliant detective whose little grey cells unravel the darkest truths. As lies unravel and hidden motives surface, family betrayals, contested inheritances, forbidden ambitions, every clue points to a killer hiding in plain sight. Can you guess who pulled the trigger before Poirot reveals the shocking truth? Chapter 1. The Invitation to Terror Tower. The late summer sun cast a golden haze over the rolling hills of Kent, where the imposing silhouette of Terror Tower stood resolute against the horizon. The ancient manor, with its ivy-clad turrets and mullioned windows, had long been a fixture of local lore, whispered about in hushed tones by villagers who spoke of its grim history and the shadows that lingered within its walls. Once the seat of the aristocratic Deverell family, it had fallen into genteel decay. Its grandeur faded, but not forgotten. Now it was the setting for an unlikely gathering, a weekend retreat organised by the reclusive Lady Beatrice Deverell, the last of her line, who had surprised the county by issuing invitations to a select group of guests. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever the loyal companion of Hercule Poirot, sat in the back of a chauffeured Rolls-Royce as it wound its way up the gravel drive. The invitation had arrived at Whitehaven Mansions only 3 days prior. Its elegant calligraphy requesting Poirot's presence for a weekend of intellectual discourse and reflection. Hastings, who had been included as an afterthought, found the phrasing peculiar, though not entirely out of character for the eccentric Lady Deverell, whom he vaguely recalled meeting at a charity gala years ago. Poirot, however, had accepted with an enigmatic smile, his moustache twitching as he murmured something about the symmetry of human motives. "Is it not curious, Hastings?" Poirot had said, folding the invitation with precise fingers. "A gathering at a place called Terror Tower, and yet the invitation speaks only of discourse. There is, I think, something more at play. The little grey cells, they are already intrigued." The car rolled to a stop before the manor's great oak doors, and Hastings stepped out, his eyes scanning the facade. The stonework was weathered, the gargoyles leering from their perches with an unsettling intensity. A butler, tall and gaunt with a face like a closed book, greeted them with a stiff bow. "Welcome, Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings," he intoned, his voice as cold as the stone beneath their feet. "Lady Deverell awaits you in the drawing-room." Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of old wood and wax polish. The drawing-room was a cavernous space, its walls lined with portraits of stern-faced Deverells, whose eyes seemed to follow the newcomers. A fire crackled in the hearth, doing little to dispel the chill that clung to the room. The guests already assembled turned as one to regard the new arrivals. Lady Beatrice Deverell, a woman of perhaps 60, stood at the centre of the group. Her silver hair was swept into an elegant chignon, and her emerald gown shimmered in the firelight. Her eyes, sharp and unyielding, betrayed a mind that missed nothing. She extended a hand to Poirot, her smile polite but guarded. "Monsieur Poirot, how delightful that you could join us. she said, her voice smooth as polished glass. "And Captain Hastings, of course. I trust your journey was pleasant." "Most pleasant, madam," Poirot replied, bowing slightly. "Though I confess the name of your home intrigues me. Terror Tower. It is not perhaps the most inviting of titles." A ripple of nervous laughter passed through the room, though it was quickly stifled. Lady Deverell's smile tightened. "A fanciful name, nothing more. My ancestors had a flair for the dramatic. Please allow me to introduce my guests." She gestured to the assembled company, each of whom Hastings studied with his usual blend of curiosity and optimism. There was Dr. Simon Caldwell, a psychiatrist of some renown, his angular features softened by a disarming smile. Beside him stood Miss Evelyn Ward, a young novelist whose Gothic romances had recently captured the public's imagination. Her dark eyes darted about the room, as if cataloguing every detail for her next book. Colonel Rupert Blake, a retired military man with a bristling moustache and a penchant for brandy, leaned heavily on a cane, his gaze fixed on the fire. Mrs. Clara Henshaw, a widow of indeterminate age, clutched a pearl necklace as she murmured pleasantries, her nervous energy palpable. Finally, there was Mr. Julian Trent, a sleek young lawyer with an air of ambition that bordered on arrogance, his fingers tapping restlessly against a cigarette case. "And of course, my nephew, Mr. Lionel Deverell," Lady Beatrice added, indicating a pale young man who lingered near the window. Lionel, perhaps in his late 20s, had the look of someone perpetually out of place, his hands stuffed deep in his pockets as he avoided eye contact. The introductions complete, Lady Deverell invited everyone to be seated. Tea was served, the clink of porcelain cups punctuating the polite conversation. Yet beneath the civility, Hastings sensed an undercurrent of tension. Miss Ward's laughter was too bright, Colonel Blake's anecdotes too forced. Even Poirot, usually so animated in company, sat in silence, his eyes moving from face to face with the precision of a watchmaker. It was Mrs. Henshaw who broke the spell. "Lady Beatrice, you've been so mysterious about this weekend," Bichou said, her voice trembling slightly. "What is the occasion? You mentioned a matter of importance in your letter." Lady Deverell set down her teacup with deliberate care. "All in good time, Mrs. Henshaw. Tonight we shall dine and enjoy one another's company. Tomorrow I shall reveal the purpose of our gathering. It is, I assure you, a matter of some gravity." Her words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. Hastings glanced at Poirot, expecting a comment, but the detective merely inclined his head, his expression unreadable. Dinner was a lavish affair, served in a dining room dominated by a chandelier that cast flickering shadows across the table. The conversation turned to lighter topics: books, travel, the state of the empire. But Hastings could not shake the feeling that each guest was guarding a secret. Lionel Deverell, in particular, seemed ill at ease, his fork scraping against his plate as he avoided his aunt's gaze. As the meal drew to a close, Lady Deverell rose, her presence commanding silence. "I trust you will all find your rooms comfortable," she said. "We shall reconvene tomorrow morning at precisely 10 o'clock. Until then, I bid you good night." The guests dispersed, their footsteps echoing in the cavernous halls. Hastings followed Poirot to their adjoining rooms, his mind buzzing with questions. "What do you make of it, Poirot?" he asked once they were alone. "There's something odd about this place, don't you think?" Poirot adjusted his tie in the mirror, his reflection serene. Odd, mon ami, perhaps, but it is not the place that concerns me. It is the people. Each one, I think, has a story they do not wish to tell. And Lady Deverell, she is the conductor of this little orchestra. Tomorrow we shall see what tune she plays." Hastings nodded, though he felt no closer to understanding. As he retired to his room, the wind howled outside, rattling the windows of Terror Tower. Somewhere in the distance, a floorboard creaked, and Hastings could not shake the sense that the night held more than mere shadows. Chapter 2. The Shadow Falls. The morning dawned grey and oppressive, the sky over Terror Tower heavy with the threat of rain. The manor's ancient walls seemed to absorb the light, casting the breakfast room in a pall of gloom despite the crystal chandelier overhead. Captain Hastings, ever punctual, descended the grand staircase at 9:30, his thoughts still tangled from the previous night's uneasy atmosphere. He had slept poorly, disturbed by the creaks and groans of the old house, and perhaps by the weight of Poirot's cryptic observations. The breakfast room was sparsely populated when he arrived. Miss Evelyn Ward sat alone at the long oak table, nibbling delicately at a piece of toast while her eyes scanned a leather-bound notebook. Colonel Blake, his face flushed from what Hastings suspected was an early brandy, was muttering to himself over a plate of kedgeree. The butler, as silent and spectral as ever, moved noiselessly to refill the coffee urn. "Good morning, Captain," Miss Ward said, her voice bright but her smile strained. "Did you sleep well? These old houses can be rather unsettling." Hastings offered a polite nod, taking a seat opposite her. "Well enough, thank you. Though I confess the name Terror Tower doesn't exactly inspire restful slumber." She laughed, a tinkling sound that seemed to echo too loudly in the quiet room. "Oh, it's all nonsense, of course. Gothic atmosphere for my next novel, perhaps. I'm sure Lady Deverell chose the name to amuse herself." Before Hastings could reply, Dr. Simon Caldwell entered, his expression as composed as it had been the previous evening. "Good morning," he said, nodding to them both. "I trust we're all prepared for Lady Deverell's grand announcement. She does seem to enjoy her theatrics." Colonel Blake snorted, setting down his fork with a clatter. "Theatrics, indeed! All this fuss and bother for what? A family squabble, most likely. That nephew of hers looks like he'd rather be anywhere else." Hastings glanced toward the door, expecting Poirot's punctual arrival, but the detective was nowhere to be seen. It was unlike Poirot to be late, and a flicker of unease stirred in Hastings's chest. He excused himself and made his way to Poirot's room, knocking softly on the heavy oak door. "Monsieur Poirot, are you ready for breakfast?" There was no answer. Frowning, Hastings pushed the door open, only to find the room immaculate but empty. The bed was neatly made, the curtains drawn, and Poirot's silver cigarette case gleamed on the bedside table. It was as if he had vanished into the ether. Hastings returned to the breakfast room, his concern growing, just as the clock struck 10. The other guests had gathered, save for Lady Deverell and her nephew Lionel. Mrs. Clara Henshaw fidgeted with her pearls, her eyes darting nervously to the door. Mr. Julian Trent, the lawyer, leaned against the mantelpiece, his cigarette case now open, a thin curl of smoke rising into the air. "Where is Lady Deverell?" Mrs. Henshaw asked, her voice high and brittle. "She said 10 o'clock precisely, did she not?" As if in answer, the butler appeared, his face even paler than before. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice trembling, "I regret to inform you that there has been an incident. Lady Beatrice Deverell is dead." A collective gasp rose from the group. Miss Ward's notebook fell to the table with a thud. Colonel Blake's hand froze midway to his glass. Hastings felt a chill run through him, his thoughts racing to Poirot's absence. "Dead?" he echoed. "How? When?" The butler swallowed hard, his composure fraying. "She was found in her study this morning, sir. At approximately 9 o'clock, by one of the maids, it appears she was stabbed." "Stabbed?" Dr. Caldwell's voice was sharp, clinical. "By whom? And where is young Lionel?" "He is in his room, sir, quite distraught. He refuses to come down." "And where is Monsieur Poirot?" Hastings demanded, his unease now a full-blown alarm. The butler hesitated. "I have not seen him this morning, sir. I assumed he was with you." Hastings's heart sank, but before he could press further, the door opened and Hercule Poirot stepped into the room, his appearance as pristine as ever. His moustache was perfectly waxed, his suit immaculate, and his eyes gleamed with a quiet intensity. "Pardon my tardiness, mes amis," he said, as if nothing were amiss. "I have been occupied. I understand there has been a tragedy." The butler repeated his grim announcement, and Poirot's expression grew grave. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, his fingers brushing his moustache. "This is most serious. Hastings, come with me. We must see the scene at once." The study was on the second floor, a room as grand and foreboding as the rest of Terror Tower. Lady Deverell's body lay slumped over her desk, a letter opener buried in her back. Blood had pooled on the polished wood, staining a pile of papers. The room was otherwise orderly, save for a single overturned chair and a shattered teacup on the floor near the fireplace. Poirot moved with deliberate care, his eyes taking in every detail. He noted the position of the body, the angle of the letter opener, the papers scattered across the desk. "Observe, Hastings," he said softly. "The teacup. It is broken, yes, but the pieces are neatly gathered. Someone has touched this scene after the crime." Hastings frowned, trying to follow Poirot's logic. But why? To cover something up? "Perhaps," Poirot replied, his gaze settling on a small silver clock on the mantelpiece. It had stopped at 8:47. "Or to tell us something. The time, it is significant. We must establish when each guest was last with Lady Deverell." The local police were summoned, but their arrival was delayed by a sudden downpour that turned the roads to mud. In the meantime, Poirot took charge, his calm authority steadying the shaken household. He gathered the guests in the drawing room, his notebook open, his pencil poised. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice clear and measured, "a crime has been committed, and it is my intention to discover the truth. I will speak with each of you in turn. Please, be precise in your recollections. The smallest detail may be of the greatest importance." Hastings watched as the guests exchanged uneasy glances. Miss Ward clutched her notebook tightly, as if it were a shield. Colonel Blake's face was flushed, his hand trembling slightly. Mrs. Henshaw's pearls clicked nervously between her fingers, and Mr. Trent's cigarette burned down to a stub. Lionel Deverell, summoned at last, sat hunched in a corner, his eyes red-rimmed and distant. "Captain Hastings," Poirot said, turning to him, "you will assist me, oui? Note the times, the alibis, the expressions, the truth it hides in the contradictions. As Poirot began his interviews, Hastings felt the weight of the mystery settle over Terror Tower like a shroud. Lady Deverell's death was no accident, and the killer was among them. The question was not only who, but why, and where the next shadow would fall. Chapter 3. The Arrival. The morning mist clung to the grounds of Eldridge Manor like a veil, softening the sharp edges of the ancient stone walls and muting the vibrant greens of the surrounding gardens. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and the faint tang of roses, now past their prime. Inside the manor, the atmosphere was no less oppressive, though the source was not the weather but the grim event of the previous night. The death of Sir Reginald Eldridge had cast a pall over the household, and the arrival of a stranger was about to stir the already troubled waters. Captain Arthur Hastings, who had spent a restless night in one of the manor's guest rooms, stood at the window of the drawing-room, his hands clasped behind his back. His usually cheerful demeanour was subdued, his brow furrowed as he gazed out at the mist. He had been roused early by the housekeeper, Mrs. Finch, who had informed him with barely concealed agitation that a detective had been summoned from London. Hastings, ever loyal to his friend Hercule Poirot, had felt a spark of relief at the news, though he could not help but wonder how Poirot would navigate the tangled web of secrets that seemed to lurk in every corner of the manor. The sound of a motor car crunching on the gravel drive drew Hastings's attention. He turned from the window just as the door to the drawing-room opened, and Mrs. Finch announced, in a tone that suggested she was not entirely pleased, "Monsieur Hercule Poirot." Hercule Poirot entered with his characteristic precision, his small, immaculate figure a stark contrast to the sombre grandeur of the room. His patent leather shoes gleamed, his moustache was perfectly symmetrical, and his dark eyes sparkled with an alertness that belied the early hour. He carried a small leather valise, which he set down with care beside an armchair, before bowing slightly to the assembled company. "Bonjour, mes amis," Poirot said, his voice smooth and measured. "It is with great regret that I find myself summoned to Eldridge Manor under such tragic circumstances. The loss of Sir Reginald Eldridge is, I understand, a matter of great distress." Hastings stepped forward, his face brightening despite the gravity of the situation. "Poirot, old chap, I'm dashed glad you're here. This business is a proper mess, and I don't mind saying I'm out of my depth." Poirot's lips twitched in the faintest of smiles, though his eyes remained fixed on the room's other occupants. Lady Beatrice Eldridge sat rigidly on a velvet-upholstered sofa, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her pale face a mask of controlled grief. Beside her, Clara Eldridge, Sir Reginald's niece, dabbed at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, though her expression was more petulant than sorrowful. Major Frederick Langley, the family's solicitor and an old friend of Sir Reginald, stood by the fireplace, his posture stiff, his gaze darting nervously toward the door. The young journalist, Evelyn Marsh, lingered near a bookcase, her notebook clutched to her chest as if it were a shield. And finally, Dr. Simon Hargrove, the local physician who had pronounced Sir Reginald dead, sat in a corner, his face drawn and his fingers tapping restlessly on the arm of his chair. Poirot's sharp eyes took in each of them in turn, noting their postures, their expressions, the small tells that betrayed their inner states. "Monsieur Hastings," he said, turning to his friend, "perhaps you would be so kind as to recount for me The events of last night, as you understand them. I have been informed only in the broadest terms by the police." Hastings cleared his throat, glancing at the others as if seeking permission to speak. When none was forthcoming, he began. "Well, Poirot, it was about 10 o'clock last night. We were all in the dining room. Dinner had just finished, you see." Sir Reginald seemed in good spirits, though there was a bit of tension, what with family matters and all. He excused himself to retire to his study, saying he had some papers to review. About an hour later, we heard a gunshot. I rushed to the study with Major Langley and found Sir Reginald. Well, he was dead. A pistol was on the floor beside him, and the window was open. The police arrived shortly after, and they've been poking about ever since." Poirot nodded, his fingers steepled before him. "And the police, they believe this to be a suicide, n'est-ce pas?" "That's what Inspector Grayson thinks," Hastings said, his tone sceptical. "But I'm not so sure. It doesn't sit right, Poirot. Sir Reginald wasn't the sort to take his own life, not with all his plans and ambitions." "Indeed," Poirot murmured, his gaze drifting to the others. "And what do you, Lady Beatrice, make of this tragedy?" Lady Beatrice's lips tightened, and she lifted her chin slightly, as if to assert her composure. "My husband was a man of great determination," she said, her voice low but steady. "I cannot believe he would end his life so abruptly. There must be another explanation." Clara Eldridge gave a small theatrical sob. "It's too dreadful to think about. Uncle Reginald was always so strong, so commanding. Why would anyone want to harm him?" Poirot's eyes narrowed slightly at her words, but he said nothing, turning instead to Major Langley. "And you, Major? You were with Monsieur Hastings when the body was discovered, oui?" Langley nodded curtly, his military bearing evident even in his unease. "That's right. We found him slumped over his desk, the pistol at his feet. The room was locked from the inside, and the key was in the lock. It looked like he'd done it himself." "Locked from the inside," Poirot repeated softly, as if savouring the phrase. "And yet the window was open. Curious, no?" Dr. Hargrove spoke up, his voice tinged with irritation. "The window was open, yes, but it's a ground-floor room. Anyone could have climbed out, or in for that matter. But the wound was consistent with a self-inflicted shot. I examined him myself." Poirot inclined his head, his expression unreadable. "And you, Mademoiselle Marsh? You are a journalist, I understand. What brings you to Eldridge Manor at such a time?" Evelyn Marsh flushed slightly, her grip tightening on her notebook. "I was invited by Sir Reginald," she said, her voice defiant. "He wanted me to write a piece on the manor's history for a magazine. I was here to gather material, nothing more." Poirot's moustache twitched again, and he turned to survey the room itself. The drawing-room was a study in opulence, with its heavy drapes, polished mahogany furniture, and a grand chandelier that gleamed dully in the morning light. Yet there was an air of neglect, as if the manor's glory days were long past. Poirot's gaze lingered on a small table near the fireplace, where a decanter of brandy sat beside a single glass, its contents untouched. "Very well," Poirot said at last, clapping his hands together with a briskness that startled Clara. "I shall begin my investigation at once. Monsieur Hastings, you will accompany me to the study where the tragedy occurred. The rest of you, I ask that you remain here for the moment. I may have questions for you later." As Poirot and Hastings made their way to the study, Hastings could not help but feel a familiar thrill of anticipation. Poirot's presence, with his unerring logic and keen observation, was like a beacon in the fog of uncertainty that had enveloped the manor. Yet, even as they approached the study door, Hastings sensed that this case would test even Poirot's formidable intellect. The locked room, the open window, the conflicting accounts, all pointed to a puzzle that was as intricate as it was sinister. The study itself was a small oak-panelled room, its walls lined with bookshelves and a large desk dominating the centre. Sir Reginald's body had been removed, but the chalk outline on the floor marked where he had fallen. The pistol still lay where it had been found, now tagged by the police. Poirot knelt beside it, his gloved fingers hovering over the weapon without touching it. "A curious thing, this pistol," he murmured. "It is a Webley revolver, oui? A military model, not uncommon. But why, I wonder, did Sir Reginald keep such a weapon in his study?" Hastings shrugged. He was a man of strong opinions, Poirot. Perhaps he felt the need for protection. "Perhaps," Poirot said, rising and moving to the open window. He leaned out, examining the sill and the ground below. No footprints, no signs of disturbance, and yet the window was open. Why? He turned back to the room, his eyes scanning every detail. The ink blotter on the desk, the half-burnt cigar in the ashtray, the single sheet of paper with a few scrawled words. "Forgive me." Poirot's expression grew thoughtful. "This note," he said, "it is meant to suggest suicide. But Hercule Poirot does not accept the obvious without question. There is more here, Hastings, much more, and we shall find it." As they left the study, the mist outside began to lift, revealing the stark outlines of Eldridge Manor in the pale morning light. But within its walls, the shadows of secrets remained, waiting for Poirot's little grey cells to illuminate them. Chapter 4. The Questions Begin. The clock in the hall of Eldridge Manor struck 11, its chimes echoing through the sombre corridors, as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings returned to the drawing-room. The air was thick with tension. The occupants seated in a loose semicircle, their faces a gallery of unease, grief, and guarded suspicion. Poirot, his small frame radiating quiet authority, took his place near the fireplace, his sharp eyes moving from one person to the next with the precision of a watchmaker inspecting gears. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice calm but commanding, "the death of Sir Reginald Eldridge is a tragedy, but it is also a puzzle. And Hercule Poirot, he does not rest until the pieces of the puzzle are in their proper place. I shall speak with each of you in turn to understand the events of last night. I ask for your candour, for the truth, it has a way of revealing itself, even when hidden." Hastings, standing by the door, marvelled at the way Poirot's presence seemed to shift the room's atmosphere. The detective's meticulous demeanour, his perfectly groomed moustache, and the slight tilt of his head as he observed the group were as disarming as they were intimidating. It was as if he could see through the facades of politeness to the secrets beneath. Poirot turned first to Lady Beatrice, whose rigid posture had not softened since his arrival. "Lady Beatrice, if you please, tell me of your husband's state of mind yesterday evening. Was he troubled? Did he speak of any concerns?" Lady Beatrice's lips pursed briefly before she spoke, her voice steady but laced with a faint tremor. "Reginald was himself, perhaps a touch distracted, but no more than usual. He was planning a new venture, a restoration of the manor's west wing. He spoke of it at dinner with some enthusiasm. I saw no sign that he was contemplating anything so dreadful. Poirot nodded, his fingers brushing the edge of his moustache. And after dinner, when he retired to his study, did you see him again? No, she replied, her eyes dropping to her hands. He often worked late. I went to my room to read. I heard nothing until the gunshot. Merci, Lady Beatrice. Poirot's gaze shifted to Clara Eldridge, whose handkerchief was now crumpled in her fist. Mademoiselle Clara, you are Sir Reginald's niece, oui? You are close to your uncle? Clara's eyes widened, and she nodded vigorously. Oh yes, Monsieur Poirot. Uncle Reginald was ever so kind to me. He was like a father, really, since my own passed away. I can't imagine why anyone would want to hurt him. Indeed, Poirot said, his tone neutral. And where were you at the time of the gunshot, mademoiselle? I was in the library, Clara said quickly. I was reading a novel, The Moonstone, I think. I heard the shot and ran to the hall, where I met Major Langley and Captain Hastings. Poirot's eyes narrowed slightly. The library is not far from the study, is it not? Did you hear anything before the shot? Voices, perhaps, or footsteps? Clara hesitated, her fingers twisting the handkerchief. No, I don't think so. It was all so sudden. Poirot made a small note in the leather-bound notebook he had produced from his valise. He turned to Major Langley, whose stern face had grown even more rigid under scrutiny. Major Langley, you are the family's solicitor, and a friend of long standing, I understand. You were with Monsieur Hastings when the body was discovered. What can you tell me of the moments before? Langley cleared his throat, his hands clasped behind his back, as if standing at attention. As Hastings said, we were in the drawing-room, having a nightcap. Sir Reginald had gone to his study around 9:30. At about 10, we heard the shot. We ran to the study, found the door locked, and forced it open. Sir Reginald was, well, you know how we found him. The pistol was on the floor, the window open, and that note on the desk. The note, Poirot repeated, his voice soft. Forgive me. A curious phrase, no? Did Sir Reginald seem to you a man seeking forgiveness? Langley's jaw tightened. He was a proud man, Monsieur Poirot. If he wrote that note, it was likely meant for his family, for some private regret. But I'll say this, he wasn't one to give up easily. Suicide doesn't fit the man I knew. Poirot inclined his head, then turned to Dr. Hargrove, who had been watching the proceedings with a mixture of impatience and unease. Doctor, you examined the body. You are certain the wound was self-inflicted? Hargrove shifted in his chair, his fingers still tapping a restless rhythm. As certain as I can be without a full post-mortem. The bullet entered the temple at close range, consistent with a revolver held by the victim himself. The angle, the powder burns, all point to suicide. And yet, Poirot said, his eyes gleaming, the human mind is not so easily read as a wound, is it? Tell me, Doctor, were you at the manor all evening? Hargrove frowned. I dined with the family, then left around 9 to check on a patient in the village. I returned just after the shot was heard, as Mrs. Finch can confirm. She let me in. Poirot's gaze lingered on Hargrove for a moment before moving to Evelyn Marsh, who stood apart, her notebook still clutched tightly. Mademoiselle Marsh, a journalist in the midst of a tragedy. You were invited by Sir Reginald, you say? Did he share with you any particular reason for this invitation, beyond the history of the manor?" Evelyn's chin lifted, her voice steady but her eyes wary. He wanted to restore the manor's reputation, to remind people of its place in English history. He thought a feature in the Clarion would help. We spoke at length yesterday afternoon, and he seemed optimistic, not despairing. "And last night," Poirot pressed. "Where were you when the shot was fired?" "In my room," Evelyn said promptly. "I was typing up my notes. I heard the commotion and came downstairs to find everyone in the hall." Poirot closed his notebook with a soft snap, his expression unreadable. "Very well. I thank you all for your cooperation. I shall now examine the grounds and speak with the staff. Monsieur Hastings, you will accompany me." As they stepped into the hall, Hastings leaned close to Poirot, his voice low. "What do you make of it, Poirot? They all seem shaken, but there's something off. I can't put my finger on it." Poirot's lips curved in a faint smile. "You feel the discord, mon ami? Because there is discord. Each account is plausible, yet each contains a note that does not harmonize with the others. The locked door, the open window, the note, these are the threads of the tapestry, but they do not yet form a picture." They made their way to the servants' quarters, where Mrs. Finch, the housekeeper, awaited them. She was a stout woman with a stern demeanour, her hands folded tightly over her apron. Poirot's questions to her were gentle but probing, eliciting details of the evening's routine. The dinner served at 7, the staff's movements, the locked doors and windows checked at 9. She confirmed Doctor. Hargrove's returned just after 10, but her eyes flickered when Poirot asked about Sir Reginald's habits. "He was particular, sir," she said, her voice low. "Always locked his study when he worked late. But last night, I thought I heard voices from the study before the shot, though I couldn't swear to it. The walls are thick, and I was in the pantry." "Voices," Poirot repeated, his eyes brightening. "This is most interesting, Madame Finch. You are certain?" "Not certain, no," she admitted, her hands twisting in her apron. "It might have been the wind, or my imagination, but I thought perhaps someone was with him." Poirot thanked her and led Hastings outside, where the mist had fully lifted, revealing the sprawling lawns and the distant woods. They paused by the study window, which stood open, its latch gleaming in the pale sunlight. Poirot examined the sill again, then the ground below, his brow furrowed. "No footprints, no marks," he murmured. "And yet the window is open. Why does it remain open, Hastings, when the room was locked? It is a question that demands an answer." Hastings frowned, his mind racing. "You think someone entered or left through the window? But the police said there's no evidence of that." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "The absence of evidence, mon ami, is not evidence of absence. We must look closer, with the eyes of the mind as well as the body. Come, let us return to the manor. There is much yet to uncover." As they walked back, the weight of the mystery seemed to settle over Hastings like the mist that had cloaked the manor that morning. Poirot, however, moved with the quiet confidence of a man who knew the truth was within his grasp, if only he could arrange the pieces correctly. Chapter 5. The Red Herrings. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawns of Eldridge Manor, its golden light doing little to dispel the chill that lingered in the air. Inside, the atmosphere was no warmer. as the inhabitants of the manor grappled with the weight of Sir Reginald Eldridge's death and the probing presence of Hercule Poirot. The detective, accompanied by Captain Hastings, had spent the morning meticulously examining the study and questioning the household, and now he sat in the library, his small notebook open before him, his pen poised like a conductor's baton. Hastings, seated opposite, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "I say, Poirot, this case is getting murkier by the minute. The police seem convinced it's suicide, but you're not buying it, are you?" Poirot's eyes gleamed with a quiet intensity. "The police, mon ami, they see what is presented to them. A locked room, a pistol, a note, but Hercule Poirot, he looks beyond the obvious. The suicide, it is too convenient, too neat, and in my experience, life is rarely so accommodating." Before Hastings could respond, the door opened, and Inspector Grayson, the local police officer in charge, entered. He was a burly man with a weathered face, his expression one of barely concealed impatience. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, nodding curtly, "I've spoken with the coroner. The preliminary report supports suicide. The wound, the powder burns, the angle, all consistent. We're preparing to close the case unless you've got something concrete to suggest otherwise." Poirot's lips curved in a polite but enigmatic smile. "Concrete, Inspector? The truth, it is not always so solid at first. It is like clay, shaped by the hands of observation and logic. Tell me, what do you make of the open window?" Grayson frowned, adjusting his cap. "The window?" Likely Sir Reginald opened it himself. It was a warm evening, and the study can get stuffy. No signs of forced entry, no footprints outside. Nothing to suggest foul. Play, perhaps, Poirot said, his tone mild but his eyes sharp. And yet the window troubles me. A man who locks his door so carefully, why does he leave his window open to the world? It is a contradiction, no? Grayson shrugged, clearly unimpressed. People do odd things, Monsieur Poirot. I've seen it before. And then there's the note. Forgive me. Sounds like a man with regrets, doesn't it? Poirot's fingers tapped lightly on his notebook. The note, oui. It is a point of interest. But let us consider another matter. You have interviewed the household, I presume. Have you formed an opinion on their alibis? Grayson pulled a small notebook from his pocket, flipping it open. They all check out, more or less. Lady Beatrice was in her room, reading. Miss Clara was in the library. Major Langley and Captain Hastings were together in the drawing room. Dr. Hargrove was out on a call, but returned just after the shot. And Miss Marsh was in her room, typing. No one saw or heard anything unusual until the gunshot at 10. Poirot nodded slowly, his gaze drifting to the window, where the sunlight glinted off the glass. And yet, Inspector, the housekeeper, Mrs. Finch, mentioned hearing voices in the study before the shot. A small detail, but one that does not align with the idea of a man alone with his thoughts. Grayson's brow furrowed. Voices? She wasn't sure, and she's getting on in years. Could have been the wind or her imagination. I wouldn't put too much stock in it. Perhaps not, Poirot said, rising gracefully from his chair. But Hercule Poirot, he puts stock in all things until they are proven irrelevant. I shall continue my inquiries, Inspector. You will permit me to speak with the household again. Grayson sighed, clearly reluctant but aware of Poirot's reputation. Do what you must, but don't stir up trouble. The family's been through enough. As Grayson left, Hastings leaned forward, his voice low. "He's got his mind made up, hasn't he?" "Suicide. Case closed. But you're on to something, Poirot. I can tell." Poirot's moustache twitched. "You are perceptive, mon ami, in your own way." The inspector, he follows the path of least resistance, and that path points to Major Langley. Did you notice how quickly he confirmed the alibis, yet how vague he was about the details? The Major, he is the obvious suspect, non? A solicitor, a trusted friend, yet perhaps one with access to Sir Reginald's secrets and his study. Hastings blinked, startled. Langley! But he was with me when the shot was fired, and he seemed as shocked as anyone. "Précisément," Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. "The perfect alibi, is it not? To be with the trustworthy Captain Hastings at the moment of the crime. But let us not leap to conclusions. We must test the waters, stir the pot, and see what rises to the surface." Poirot's next move was to summon Major Langley to the library. The solicitor entered with his usual military bearing, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, taking a seat, "I trust you're making progress." "I'm arranging the pieces, Major," Poirot replied, his tone genial but probing. "Tell me, you have known Sir Reginald for many years. Were there any matters, financial, personal, that might have caused him distress?" Langley's jaw tightened. Reginald was a wealthy man, but wealth brings its own burdens. He'd made some risky investments recently, and there were tensions in the family. Clara's inheritance, for one. She's due a substantial sum when she marries, but Reginald was reconsidering the terms. He thought she was too impulsive. Poirot's eyebrows rose slightly, and this caused friction. "Some," Langley admitted. "Clara's a spirited girl, and she didn't take kindly to his interference, but it was nothing serious, just family squabbles." "And you, Major? As his solicitor, you handled his affairs. Were there any irregularities?" Langley's face darkened. "If you're suggesting I had anything to do with his death, Monsieur Poirot, you're barking up the wrong tree. I was his friend, not his enemy." Poirot raised a placating hand. "I suggest nothing, Major. I merely seek the truth. One final question. The pistol in the study. It was Sir Reginald's, oui?" Langley nodded. "Yes, a Webley revolver. He kept it in a locked drawer in his desk, only he had the key." "Curious," Poirot murmured. "A locked drawer, a locked door, an open window. The contradictions, they multiply." After Langley left, Poirot turned to Hastings. "You see, mon ami, the Major is eager to point us toward Clara's motives, yet he guards his own secrets. And the pistol, why was it not in its drawer? We must speak with Mademoiselle Clara next." Clara Eldridge entered the library with a nervous flutter, her handkerchief now a sodden ball in her hands. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice trembling, "this is all so dreadful. I can't bear to think of Uncle Reginald." Poirot's expression softened, but his eyes remained sharp. "Mademoiselle, your grief is understandable, but I must ask, your uncle, he was reconsidering your inheritance, was he not? This caused you some distress?" Clara's eyes widened, and she flushed. "Who told you that?" "Major Langley, I suppose." "It's true, Uncle was being difficult, but I loved him. I was in the library all evening, reading, as I told you." "And you heard nothing unusual?" Poirot pressed. "No voices, no footsteps." Clara hesitated, her gaze darting to the window. "Well, I might have heard something now that you mention it. A sort of muffled sound, like someone arguing. But it was faint, and I thought it was just the servants." Poirot made another note, his pen moving with deliberate precision. "Merci, mademoiselle. You have been most helpful." As Clara left, Hastings shook his head. "She's hiding something, Poirot. That hesitation, it's not just grief." "Oui, mon ami," Poirot said, closing his notebook. "The young lady, she plays the part of the grieving niece, but her eyes betray her. And the Major, he points us toward her, perhaps to deflect from himself. The red herrings, they swim in abundance, but Hercule Poirot, he will catch the true fish." The library door opened again, and Mrs. Finch appeared, her face pale. "Monsieur Poirot, I've just found something in the study. I thought you should see it." Poirot's eyes lit up. "Lead the way, Madame Finch. The pieces, they begin to move." As they followed the housekeeper, Hastings felt a familiar thrill. The case was deepening, and Poirot's little grey cells were already at work, sifting through the lies and half-truths to uncover the heart of the mystery. Chapter 6. A Clue in Detail. The study of Eldridge Manor, with its oak-panelled walls and heavy drapes, seemed to hold the weight of Sir Reginald's death in its very air. As Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings followed Mrs. Finch into the room, the late afternoon light filtered through the open window, casting a golden glow over the desk where the tragedy had occurred. The chalk outline on the floor was a stark reminder of the body that had been removed, and the Webley revolver, still tagged by the police, lay undisturbed on the carpet. Mrs. Finch, her hands twisting nervously in her apron, gestured towards the desk. "I was tidying up, Monsieur Poirot, as the police said I might, and I found this tucked under the blotter. I didn't notice it before. It must have been missed in the confusion." She produced a small folded piece of paper, its edges slightly crumpled. Poirot took it with gloved hands, his movements precise as he unfolded it. The paper bore a single line of text, written in a hurried, uneven hand. "Meet me at 9:45. Urgent." There was no signature, no indication of who had written it or to whom it was addressed. Poirot's eyes gleamed as he studied the note. "Most interesting, Madame Finch. You are certain this was found under the blotter?" "Yes, sir," she replied, nodding vigorously. "I lifted it to dust, and there it was. I thought it might be important." "Indeed it is," Poirot murmured, turning the paper over to examine it further. "The ink is fresh, the writing hurried. This was written shortly before the tragedy, I think. Merci, Madame Finch. You have done well to bring this to my attention." As the housekeeper retreated, Hastings leaned closer, his curiosity piqued. "What do you make of it, Poirot? A secret meeting? Could it mean someone was with Sir Reginald just before he died?" Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign Hastings knew well. "Précisément, mon ami. This note, it is a thread in the tapestry, a thread that leads us closer to the truth. But we must tread carefully, for it is fragile. The time, 9:45, is significant. The shot was heard at 10. This suggests a rendezvous that may have ended in tragedy." He moved to the desk, his eyes scanning every detail with the intensity of a hawk. The ink blotter was slightly askew, as if it had been lifted and replaced in haste. The half-burnt cigar in the ashtray caught his attention next. Poirot leaned closer, inhaling delicately. "This cigar, Hastings, it is Cuban, of fine quality. Yet it was extinguished before it was half-smoked. Why would a man light a cigar, only to abandon it so soon?" Hastings frowned, trying to follow Poirot's reasoning. Perhaps he was interrupted. By whoever wrote that note. Perhaps, Poirot said, his tone thoughtful. He turned to the open window, which still puzzled him. The latch was polished brass, free of scratches or signs of tampering. Below, the flower bed showed no footprints, no crushed petals, nothing to suggest anyone had entered or exited. Yet the window's position, wide open to the evening air, nagged at him like an unresolved chord. Poirot returned to the desk, his fingers brushing the edge of the drawer where Sir Reginald had kept the revolver. The key to this drawer, he said almost to himself. Major Langley said only Sir Reginald had it. Yet the pistol was found on the floor, not in the drawer. How did it come to be there if the door was locked and the key was inside? Hastings shook his head, bewildered. It's a proper locked room mystery, Poirot. No one could have gotten in or out unless they went through the window, and there's no evidence of that. Poirot's lips curved in a faint smile. The evidence, mon ami. It is not always what it seems. The absence of footprints does not mean the window was not used, and this note, it tells us Sir Reginald was expecting someone. We must discover who and why. Leaving the study, Poirot led Hastings to the library, where he requested the presence of Evelyn Marsh, the journalist. She entered with a wary expression, her notebook still clutched like a talisman. Poirot greeted her with a courteous bow, though his eyes were sharp as ever. Mademoiselle Marsh, he began, you have told us you were in your room typing at the time of the shot. But let us be precise. At 9:45, where were you? Evelyn's cheeks flushed slightly, but her voice was steady. I was in my room, as I said. I'd been typing up my notes from my interview with Sir Reginald. I didn't leave until I heard the commotion in the hall. Poirot nodded, his fingers steepled before him. And during your interview with Sir Reginald, did he mention any plans for the evening? A meeting, perhaps? Evelyn hesitated, her eyes flickering to the side. No, not specifically. He was excited about the manor's restoration, as I told you, but he did seem a bit preoccupied toward the end of our talk. He glanced at his watch once or twice, as if he had somewhere to be. Poirot's eyebrows rose slightly. His watch, you say? A small detail, but one that matters. Did you notice anything else? His manner? His tone? He was tense, I suppose, Evelyn admitted. Not upset exactly, but as if something was weighing on him. I thought it was just the pressure of his plans for the manor. Merci, mademoiselle, Poirot said, dismissing her with a nod. As she left, he turned to Hastings, his expression grave. The watch, Hastings. It is a clue in detail. Sir Reginald was expecting something or someone at 9:45. The note confirms it. But who was it, and what was so urgent? Their next stop was the drawing room, where Dr. Hargrove was waiting, his impatience evident in the way he drummed his fingers on the arm of his chair. Poirot wasted no time. Doctor, you returned to the manor just after 10, oui? But at 9:45, where were you? Hargrove's eyes narrowed. I was in the village, tending to old Mrs. Carter. She's got a bad heart, and I was checking her medication. I left her house around 9:50 and drove straight back here. Mrs. Finch let me in, as I told you. Poirot nodded, his gaze lingering on Hargrove's hands. And during dinner, did Sir Reginald seem himself? Or was there perhaps a sign of unease? Hargrove shrugged, his tone clipped. He was his usual self, opinionated, full of plans. He and Major Langley had a bit of a row about some legal matter, but it wasn't serious, just business. A row, Poirot repeated, his voice soft. And what was the nature of this disagreement? Hargrove hesitated, then waved a hand dismissively. Something about the estate's finances. I didn't catch the details. I'm not one for business talk. You'd have to ask Langley. Poirot made a note, his pen moving with deliberate care. Merci, Doctor. You have been most helpful. As Hargrove left, Hastings shook his head. Everyone's got an alibi, Poirot, but they're all so vague. And that note, it's got to be the key, hasn't it? Poirot's eyes gleamed with a quiet excitement. The note, the cigar, the watch, these are the details that will unravel the mystery, mon ami. They are small, but they speak loudly to Hercule Poirot. We must now consider the alibis more closely. The time of 9:45, it is the pivot on which this case turns. Someone was here, in this study, with Sir Reginald, and that someone they left behind more than they intended. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the manor into twilight, Poirot's mind was already at work, piecing together the fragments of truth hidden in the details. The note, with its urgent summons, was a beacon in the fog of deception, and Poirot was determined to follow its light to the heart of the mystery. Chapter 7. More lies surface. The evening had settled over Eldridge Manor, cloaking its ancient stone walls in a deepening twilight that seemed to mirror the growing unease within. In the dining room, the long mahogany table gleamed under the chandelier's muted glow, but the atmosphere was far from festive. Hercule Poirot, seated at one end, surveyed the assembled company with his characteristic calm, his dark eyes missing nothing. Captain Hastings sat to his right, his expression a mix of curiosity and apprehension, while the household, Lady Beatrice, Clara Eldridge, Major Langley, Dr. Hargrove, and Evelyn Marsh, occupied their usual places, their faces etched with varying degrees of tension. Poirot had requested this gathering, ostensibly for dinner, but it was clear to all that his purpose was not culinary. The meal, served by a subdued Mrs. Finch, passed in near silence. The clink of silverware and the occasional murmur of polite conversation the only sounds. Poirot, however, ate sparingly, his attention fixed on the subtle interplay of glances and gestures among the diners. As the dessert plates were cleared, Poirot set down his napkin with deliberate precision and rose, his small frame commanding the room's attention. Mesdames et messieurs, he began, his voice smooth but carrying an undercurrent of steel, we are gathered not only to dine, but to confront the shadow that hangs over this house. The death of Sir Reginald Eldridge is no simple matter of suicide, as some would have us believe. There are secrets here, hidden in the silences, in the half-truths, and Hercule Poirot, he will bring them to light. A ripple of unease passed through the room. Lady Beatrice's hands tightened in her lap. Clara's eyes darted to Major Langley, and Dr. Hargrove's fingers resumed their restless drumming. Evelyn Marsh clutched her ever-present notebook, her lips pressed into a thin line. Poirot continued, his gaze sweeping the table. Let us speak of motives, for where there is murder, there is always a reason. Sir Reginald, he was a man of wealth, of influence, but also of conflict. His decisions, they touched each of you in some way, did they not? Major Langley cleared his throat, his military bearing stiff. If you're implying something, Monsieur Poirot, I'd prefer you come out with it. Sir Reginald and I had our disagreements, but they were professional, nothing more. Poirot's moustache twitched. Professional, oui, but not without passion. You argued with Sir Reginald at dinner, did you not? About the estate's finances? Langley's face reddened. A minor matter. He wanted to redirect funds from Clara's inheritance to his restoration project. I advised against it, too risky, given the market. But it was hardly a reason for murder. Clara gasped, her handkerchief fluttering to the table. You told him to cut my inheritance. How could you, Major? Uncle Reginald promised me that money for my future. Langley's jaw tightened. I was protecting the estate, Clara. Your uncle's plans were ambitious, but they were draining the accounts. Someone had to be sensible. Ah, Poirot's eyes gleamed. And you, Mademoiselle Clara, you were aware of this change in your uncle's plans? Clara hesitated, her eyes filling with tears. I overheard them talking about it a few days ago. I was upset, of course, but I didn't think, I would never— Enough, Clara! Lady Beatrice interrupted, her voice sharp. Monsieur Poirot, my husband's decisions were his own. If he chose to alter Clara's inheritance, it was for the good of the family. I supported him in that. Poirot tilted his head, studying her. And yet, Lady Beatrice, you too had your own concerns, no? Sir Reginald's ventures, they placed a strain on the marriage, perhaps. There are whispers, forgive me, but I must speak plainly, of a distance between you. Lady Beatrice's face paled, but her composure held. Every marriage has its challenges, Monsieur Poirot. Reginald and I were united in our goals for the manor. I had no reason to wish him harm. Poirot nodded, turning his attention to Dr. Hargrove. And you, Doctor. You were a frequent guest at Eldridge Manor, a trusted friend. But there were tensions, were there not? Perhaps a matter of debts unpaid, or promises unkept. Hargrove's fingers stilled, his eyes narrowing. I don't know what you're getting at, Poirot. I treated Sir Reginald for his ailments, nothing more. If you're fishing for scandal, you'll find none here. Poirot's smile was faint but knowing. And you, Mademoiselle Marsh? A journalist, invited to write of the manor's glories. Yet you are here at a time of great unrest. Did Sir Reginald share with you any confidences? Perhaps something that made him a target? Evelyn's grip on her notebook tightened. I've told you, Monsieur Poirot. He wanted a feature on the manor. He spoke of its history, its legacy. If there was anything else, he didn't tell me. Poirot's gaze lingered on her for a moment. Before he clapped his hands together, the sound sharp in the quiet room. Very well, but let us return to the note found in the study. Meet me at 9:45. Urgent. This note, it suggests Sir Reginald was not alone before his death. Someone was with him, someone who wrote this summons. And that someone, they have not yet come forward. The room fell silent, the weight of Poirot's words settling over the group like a fog. Hastings, watching closely, noticed the subtle shifts in posture. Clara's hunched shoulders, Langley's clenched jaw, Hargrove's averted gaze. Even Lady Beatrice, usually so composed, seemed to falter for a moment. Poirot continued, his voice low but piercing. There are lies here, mes amis. Lies that conceal the truth. A financial dispute, a contested inheritance, a strained marriage. These are the threads of motive. And then there is the matter of the cigar, half-smoked and abandoned. A man does not light a fine Cuban cigar, only to extinguish it unless he is interrupted or distracted. He paused, letting the silence deepen. I ask you now to consider your accounts carefully. The time of 9:45, it is the key. Who was where and with whom? The truth, it will not remain hidden for long. As the group dispersed, their faces a mix of relief and dread. Hastings leaned close to Poirot. You're rattling them, Poirot. That bit about the cigar, was it really significant? Poirot's eyes twinkled. Everything is significant, mon ami, until it is proven otherwise. The cigar, it tells us Sir Reginald was not in a state of despair. He was calm, enjoying a moment of luxury, until something or someone changed that. And the note, it points to a meeting that ended in death. We must now look to the alibis. For one of them, it is false. They moved to the hall, where Poirot paused by a grandfather clock, its pendulum swinging with a steady tick. The time, Hastings, it is always the time. The note said 9:45. The shot was at 10. What happened in those 15 minutes? That is where the truth lies. Poirot's next move was to seek out Mrs. Finch, who was clearing the dining room. Her hands trembled slightly as she stacked plates, and Poirot's gentle tone seemed to put her at ease. "Madame Finch, you spoke of hearing voices in the study before the shot. Can you recall anything more? Perhaps a tone, a word?" Mrs. Finch frowned, her brow creasing. "It's hard to say, sir. I was in the pantry, and the walls are thick. But I thought I heard a man's voice, raised, like he was angry. And then, maybe a woman's, softer, but I couldn't be sure. It was just a moment, then silence until the shot." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "A man and a woman. This is most illuminating. Merci, Madame Finch." As they returned to the library, Hastings shook his head. "Voices, Poirot? That could be anyone, or no one. Mrs. Finch isn't even certain." "Non, Hastings," Poirot said, his voice firm. "She is not certain, but her ears, they do not lie. The voices, they confirm the note. Someone was with Sir Reginald, and that someone has woven a web of lies to hide their presence. We must now find the thread that will unravel it." The manor's shadows deepened as night fell, and with them, the secrets of Eldridge Manor seemed to grow thicker, more tangled. But Poirot, with his little grey cells at work, was undeterred, his mind already tracing the faint outlines of a truth that was beginning to emerge from the lies. Chapter 8. The Emotional Turning Point. The night had drawn its heavy curtain over Eldridge Manor, the moon casting a pale, silvery light through the tall windows of the drawing-room. The air was thick with the scent of old wood and wax polish, but the atmosphere was charged with something far less tangible, a current of fear, suspicion, and unspoken truths. Hercule Poirot stood near the fireplace, his small, immaculate figure a beacon of calm amidst the storm of emotions swirling among Fouille's household. Captain Hastings, seated nearby, watched with growing unease as the group assembled once more, their faces drawn and their eyes wary. Poirot had requested this gathering after dinner, his demeanour suggesting that something significant was afoot. The household, Lady Beatrice, Clara Eldridge, Major Langley, Dr. Hargrove, and Evelyn Marsh sat in a tense semicircle, their postures rigid, their gazes flickering between Poirot and one another. The discovery of the note, the whispers of voices in the study, and Poirot's relentless probing had frayed their nerves, and now, it seemed, a breaking point was near. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice low but resonant, "we have spoken of alibis, of motives, of the small details that weave the tapestry of this tragedy. But tonight, we must confront the heart of the matter, the human heart, for it is in the emotions, the passions, that the truth often hides. Sir Reginald Eldridge's death was no accident, no act of despair. It was murder, and the murderer is among us." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Clara's hand flew to her mouth. Lady Beatrice's face paled, and Major Langley's jaw clenched so tightly that a muscle twitched in his cheek. Dr. Hargrove leaned forward, his eyes narrowing, while Evelyn Marsh gripped her notebook as if it could anchor her against the accusation. "Murder," Lady Beatrice said, her voice trembling but defiant. Monsieur Poirot, you go too far. The police have said it was suicide. You have no proof." Poirot's eyes gleamed with quiet certainty. "Proof, Lady Beatrice, is built from the fragments of truth. The note, 'Meet me at 9:45, urgent,' tells us Sir Reginald expected someone in his study. The voices heard by Mrs. Finch, faint but real, confirm it. The cigar, half-smoked, suggests an interruption. And the window, open yet unmarked, whispers of a clever deception. These are not the signs of a man alone with his despair. They are the signs of a crime." Clara's sob broke the silence, her shoulders shaking. "It's too awful! Uncle Reginald? Murdered? Who could do such a thing?" Poirot turned to her, his expression softening, but his gaze piercing. "Mademoiselle Clara, your grief is touching, but let us speak plainly. Your uncle's decision to alter your inheritance caused you pain, did it not? You felt betrayed, perhaps angry?" Clara's eyes widened, tears spilling over. "I was upset, yes, but I loved him. I'd never hurt him. You can't think I'd—" Her words dissolved into a choked sob, and she buried her face in her handkerchief. Lady Beatrice reached out, placing a hand on her niece's arm, but her own expression was strained, as if she were holding back her own emotions. Poirot's gaze shifted to Major Langley. "And you, Major, you argued with Sir Reginald about the estate's finances. You knew of his plans, his risks. Perhaps you feared for your own position, your influence." Langley shot to his feet, his face flushed with indignation. "This is outrageous, Poirot. I was his friend, his solicitor. I tried to protect him from his own folly. If you're accusing me, you're dead wrong." "Sit, Major," Poirot said calmly, his hand raised. "I accuse no one, yet I merely seek the truth. And the truth, it is like a mirror, reflecting what we wish to hide." He turned to Dr. Hargrove, whose restless fingers had stilled, his face a mask of controlled anger. "Doctor, you were absent from the manor at 9:45, but you returned just after the shot. Your patient, Mrs. Carter, confirms your visit, but the timing. It is tight, no? Could you have returned earlier, perhaps unseen?" Hargrove's eyes flashed. "I've told you where I was, Poirot. I'm a doctor, not a murderer. If you doubt me, check with Mrs. Carter again. She'll tell you I was there until nearly 10. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable, before turning to Evelyn Marsh. "And you, Mademoiselle Marsh, a journalist with a keen eye. You observed Sir Reginald closely, yet you claim to know nothing of his troubles. But your notebook, perhaps it holds more than you have shared?" Evelyn's grip on her notebook tightened, her voice sharp. "I've told you everything, Monsieur Poirot. My notes are about the manor, nothing more. I'm here to write a story, not to be part of one." Poirot's moustache twitched, and he stepped forward, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "And yet, mes amis, one of you is part of this story. A story of betrayal, of greed, of hidden passion. And tonight, that story begins to unravel." He paused, letting the silence stretch until it was almost unbearable. Then, with a sudden clap of his hands, he said, "Mademoiselle Clara, you have spoken of your love for your uncle, but let us return to the library, where you were reading at 9:45. You heard voices, you said, muffled, perhaps an argument. But there is something you have not told us, is there not?" Clara's head snapped up, her tear-streaked face pale. I don't know what you mean." Poirot's eyes locked onto hers, his voice gentle but unrelenting. "You were not in the library the entire time, mademoiselle. You left, perhaps to speak with your uncle, to plead your case about the inheritance, and you saw something or someone that you have not shared." The room seemed to hold its breath. Clara's lips trembled, and then With a wrenching sob, she broke. "I didn't mean to lie. I was in the library, but I went to the hall just before 10. I wanted to talk to Uncle Reginald, to beg him not to change my inheritance. I was outside the study door, and I heard voices, his and someone else's, a woman's, I think. They were arguing, but I couldn't make out the words. I was too afraid to knock, so I went back to the library. And then I heard the shot. The confession hung in the air like a thunderclap. Lady Beatrice's hand dropped from Clara's arm, her face a mask of shock. Major Langley's eyes narrowed, and Dr. Hargrove leaned back, his expression unreadable. Evelyn Marsh scribbled furiously in her notebook, her pen scratching against the paper. Poirot nodded, his expression grave. "Merci, Mademoiselle Clara. Your truth, it is a step toward justice, but it raises a question. Who was the woman in the study with Sir Reginald? And what was the nature of their argument?" He turned to the group, his voice rising with quiet authority. "The net tightens, mes amis. The lies, they begin to crumble. Tomorrow we shall gather again, and I shall lay before you the solution to this puzzle. For now, I bid you good night." As the group dispersed, their faces a mixture of relief and dread, Hastings followed Poirot to the library, his mind racing. Good Lord, Poirot! Clara's confession, it changes everything. A woman in the study. Could it be Lady Beatrice? Poirot's eyes twinkled in the dim light. Perhaps, mon ami, but we must not leap to conclusions. Clara's truth is partial, a crack in the facade, but the full picture remains hidden. The woman, the voices, the note, these are the keys, and tomorrow we shall turn them. As they retired for the night, the manor seemed to pulse with secrets, each shadow hiding a fragment of the truth. Poirot, however, was undaunted, his little grey cells working tirelessly to piece together the puzzle that would reveal the murderer of Sir Reginald Eldridge. Chapter 9. The Trap. The morning sun rose over Eldridge Manor, its rays piercing the lingering mist and bathing the ancient stone walls in a pale, almost ethereal light. Inside, the atmosphere was anything but serene. The household had spent a restless night. The weight of Clara Eldridge's confession and Hercule Poirot's ominous promise of a revelation hanging over them like a storm cloud. The drawing-room, where Poirot had summoned the group once more, was a study in tension, its heavy drapes and polished furniture unable to mask the unease that permeated the air. Poirot stood near the grand fireplace, his small, immaculate figure a stark contrast to the room's sombre opulence. His patent leather shoes gleamed, his moustache was perfectly symmetrical, and his dark eyes sparkled with the quiet confidence of a man who held the threads of truth in his hands. Captain Hastings stood by the window, his arms crossed, watching the proceedings with a mix of anticipation and apprehension. The others, Lady Beatrice Clara, Major Langley, Dr. Hargrove, and Evelyn Marsh, sat in a semicircle, their faces a gallery of guarded expressions, each betraying a flicker of fear or defiance. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice calm but carrying a weight that silenced the room. "Last night we heard a truth from Mademoiselle Clara, a truth that has shifted the puzzle of Sir Reginald Eldridge's death. She heard voices in the study, a man and a woman arguing before the fatal shot. This, combined with the note, 'Meet me at 9:45, urgent,' tells us that Sir Reginald was not alone. Someone was with him, someone who has woven a web of deception to conceal their presence. Today we shall tighten the net and see who is caught." Lady Beatrice's lips tightened, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "Monsieur Poirot, this is becoming intolerable. You speak of traps and murderers, but you have no proof. My husband's death was a tragedy, not a conspiracy." Poirot's eyes gleamed as he inclined his head. "Patience, Lady Beatrice. The proof? It is in the details, and the details, they do not lie. Let us review the facts, and then, perhaps, we shall see who squirms under the pressure of the truth." He paced slowly before the fireplace, his hands clasped behind his back. At 9:45, Sir Reginald was in his study, expecting a visitor, as the note suggests. At 10, a shot was heard. And he was found dead, the door locked, the window open, a pistol at his feet, and a note, "Forgive me," on his desk. The police believe this to be suicide, but Hercule Poirot, he sees more. The cigar half smoked tells us Sir Reginald was calm, enjoying a moment of luxury. The voices heard by Mrs. Finch and Mademoiselle Clara suggest a confrontation. And the window, open yet unmarked, hints at a clever ruse. He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. Each of you has an alibi, yet each alibi has a weakness. Lady Beatrice, you were in your room, reading, but no one can confirm this. Mademoiselle Clara, you were in the library, but you admit to being near the study at 9:45. Major Langley, you were with Monsieur Hastings, but only after 9:50, leaving a window of time unaccounted for. Dr. Hargrove, you were in the village, but your return was suspiciously timed. And Mademoiselle Marsh, you were typing in your room, yet your notes remain unseen. One of you is not telling the full truth. Major Langley's face reddened. "This is preposterous, Poirot. You're casting suspicion on us all without evidence. I was with Hastings when the shot was fired. How could I have been in the study?" Poirot raised a hand, his voice steady. "Calm yourself, Major. I do not say you pulled the trigger. But the truth, it is like a mosaic. Each piece must fit perfectly. Let us consider another piece, the key to the study door. It was found in the lock, inside, suggesting Sir Reginald locked himself in. But the pistol was kept in a locked drawer, and only Sir Reginald had that key. How then did the pistol come to be on the floor?" Dr. Hargrove leaned forward, his voice sharp. "The police explain that, Poirot. Sir Reginald took the pistol from the drawer himself. It's simple. Simple, oui," Poirot said, his eyes narrowing, "but too simple. The mind of Hercule Poirot, it seeks the elegance of truth, not the convenience of assumption. Let us test your alibis further. Mademoiselle Clara, you heard a woman's voice in the study. Can you describe it? Soft, sharp, young, old?" Clara's hands twisted in her lap, her eyes darting nervously. "It was soft, I think. Not loud, but urgent. I couldn't make out the words, but it sounded like she was pleading." Poirot nodded, turning to Lady Beatrice. "And you, Lady Beatrice? Did you perhaps visit your husband in the study that evening? A private matter, a discussion of the marriage, perhaps?" Lady Beatrice's face stiffened, her voice cold. "I told you, I was in my room. I had no reason to go to the study. If you're suggesting I was the woman Clara heard, you're mistaken." Poirot's moustache twitched, and he turned to Evelyn Marsh. "Mademoiselle Marsh, your notebook, it is your constant companion. Perhaps it holds a clue, a detail from your interview with Sir Reginald that you have not shared. Will you permit me to see it?" Evelyn's grip tightened, her voice defiant. "My notes are private, Monsieur Poirot. They're about the manor's history, nothing more. I won't have you prying into my work." Poirot's smile was faint but knowing. Very well, but the truth, it cannot be hidden forever. Let us now consider a hypothesis. Suppose Sir Reginald was expecting a visitor at 9:45, as the note suggests. Suppose this visitor argued with him, perhaps over money, or love, or betrayal. Suppose this argument led to his death, and the scene was arranged to look like suicide. The note, the pistol, the locked door. But the window, it betrays the deception. Someone left through it or entered through it, and they were careful to leave no trace. The room was silent, the tension palpable. Clara's eyes were wide with fear. Major Langley's jaw was set, and Dr. Hargrove's fingers had resumed their restless drumming. Lady Beatrice stared straight ahead, her face unreadable, while Evelyn scribbled in her notebook, her pen moving almost frantically. Poirot clapped his hands, the sound sharp in the quiet. I propose a small experiment. Tonight, after dinner, I shall recreate the conditions of the crime. We shall gather in the study, and I shall demonstrate how the murderer accomplished their task. I ask that you all be present, for the truth, it will not wait. As the group dispersed, their faces a mix of dread and curiosity, Hastings followed Poirot to the library, his mind racing. Good Lord, Poirot, you're setting a trap. But who are you trying to catch? Clara, Lady Beatrice, Langley. Poirot's eyes twinkled in the dim light. Perchance, mon ami. The trap, it is not for one person alone, but for the truth itself. The murderer, they will feel the pressure, and under pressure, they will make a mistake. The voices, the note, the window, these are the keys, and tonight we shall turn them. As they prepared for the evening's demonstration, the manor seemed to pulse with anticipation, its shadows hiding the secrets that Poirot was determined to uncover. The stage was set, the players assembled, and the little grey cells of Hercule Poirot were poised to spring the trap that would reveal the murderer of Sir Reginald Eldridge. Chapter 10. The Reveal. The study of Eldridge Manor was steeped in shadow as the evening deepened, the single lamp on the desk casting a pool of light that seemed to accentuate the darkness rather than dispel it. The room was crowded, the air heavy with anticipation and dread. Hercule Poirot stood at the centre, his small, immaculate figure commanding the space as if it were a stage. Captain Hastings stood near the door, his eyes darting between Poirot and the assembled household, Lady Beatrice, Clara Eldridge, Major Langley, Dr. Hargrove, and Evelyn Marsh, who sat or stood in a tense semicircle, their faces pale in the dim light. The Webley revolver, still tagged by the police, lay on the desk beside the chalk outline of Sir Reginald's body. The window stood open, as it had been on the night of the murder, admitting a faint breeze that stirred the heavy drapes. Poirot had arranged this gathering with meticulous care, promising a demonstration that would unravel the mystery of Sir Reginald Eldridge's death. The household, though reluctant, had complied, drawn by the weight of Poirot's authority and the promise of truth. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, his voice clear and resonant, we are gathered in this room, where Sir Reginald Eldridge met his end, to bring light to the shadows of deception. You have heard my questions, my observations, and now I shall lay before you the solution to this puzzle, a puzzle of murder, disguised as suicide and woven with the threads of motive, opportunity, and cunning, He paused, his dark eyes scanning the group, noting the tightened lips of Lady Beatrice, the nervous fidgeting of Clara, the rigid posture of Major Langley, the impatient scowl of Dr. Hargrove, and the guarded expression of Evelyn Marsh, her notebook clutched tightly. "Let us begin with the facts," Poirot continued, pacing slowly before the desk. "At 10 o'clock, a gunshot was heard, and Sir Reginald was found dead. The door locked from the inside, the key in the lock, the window open, a pistol at his feet, and a note, 'Forgive me,' on the desk." The police concluded suicide, but Hercule Poirot, he sees beyond the obvious. The note found under the blotter, "Meet me at 9:45, urgent," tells us Sir Reginald was expecting a visitor. The voices heard by Mademoiselle Clara and Mrs. Finch confirm this. The cigar, half-smoked, suggests he was calm until interrupted. And the window, open yet unmarked, is the key to the deception. He turned to the group, his gaze piercing. "Each of you had a motive. Lady Beatrice, your marriage was strained by Sir Reginald's ambitions. Mademoiselle Clara, your inheritance was threatened. Major Langley, you argued over the estate's finances. Dr. Hargrove, you had debts Sir Reginald might have refused to cover. And Mademoiselle Marsh, your presence here was more than journalistic curiosity, was it not?" Evelyn's eyes flashed, but she said nothing, her pen poised over her notebook. Poirot continued, undeterred. "Let us reconstruct the evening. At 9:45, Sir Reginald was in this study, expecting a visitor. The note suggests urgency, a matter that could not wait. At 10, the shot was fired. But what happened in those 15 minutes? The answer lies in the window and the voices." He moved to the window, his gloved hand gesturing toward the open frame. "This window, it is the heart of the mystery. No footprints, no marks, yet it was open. Why? Because it was part of the murderer's plan. A plan to make murder look like suicide. The killer entered the study, argued with Sir Reginald, and shot him with his own revolver. But to escape the locked room, they used the window, not to climb out, but to create the illusion of an exit." Hastings, unable to contain himself, interjected, "But Poirot, how could they leave no trace? The flower bed outside is untouched." Poirot's moustache twitched in a faint smile. "Précisément, mon ami. The flower bed is untouched because no one climbed out. The window was opened after the shot from inside to suggest an intruder. The killer was still in the manor when the shot was heard, hiding among you, their alibi carefully constructed." A murmur of unease rippled through the group. Clara's hand flew to her mouth, and Major Langley's eyes narrowed. Poirot pressed on, his voice rising with quiet intensity. "Let us consider the voices. Mademoiselle Clara heard a man and a woman arguing. Mrs. Finch heard the same. But who was the woman? And who was the man? The note tells us Sir Reginald expected someone, but the voices suggest a confrontation. Let us test a hypothesis." He turned to Evelyn Marsh, his gaze unrelenting. "Mademoiselle Marsh, you have been reticent about your notes, but I suspect they contain more than the history of Eldridge Manor. During your interview with Sir Reginald, he confided in you, did he not? A secret that made him a target." Evelyn's face paled, her grip on her notebook tightening. I don't know what you mean. My notes are about the manor, nothing else." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "No, mademoiselle. Your notes contain a truth Sir Reginald shared. A truth about a scandal, perhaps, or a betrayal. You met him in the study at 9:45, as the note requested. You argued, and in that argument the seeds of murder were sown. Evelyn stood, her voice trembling with defiance. This is absurd. I was in my room typing. I didn't go to the study. You have no proof. Poirot raised a hand, his voice calm but firm. The proof, mademoiselle, is in the details. Your typewriter ribbon, it is new. Yet your notes from that evening are sparse. Why? Because you were not typing at 9:45. You were in the study, arguing with Sir Reginald about a story that could ruin reputations. And when the argument turned deadly, you shot him, using his own revolver, and staged the scene to look like suicide. The room erupted in gasps. Lady Beatrice's hand flew to her chest, Clara sobbed, and Major Langley leapt to his feet. This is outrageous, Poirot! Miss Marsh, a murderer! You're grasping at straws! Poirot's gaze remained fixed on Evelyn, who had gone deathly pale. No, Major! The straws, they form a rope. The note was in your handwriting, Mademoiselle Marsh. The police have confirmed it. You wrote to Sir Reginald, summoning him to the study. You argued, perhaps over a story he forbid you to publish. A story of financial misconduct, or perhaps an affair involving the manor. In a moment of rage, you took the revolver from the drawer, which he had opened during your discussion, and shot him. You then opened the window, dropped the pistol, and placed the "Forgive me" note to suggest suicide. You returned to your room, joining the others in the hall when the shot was heard, your alibi secured. Evelyn's notebook fell to the floor, her hands shaking. No, you're wrong. I couldn't. Poirot's voice softened, but his eyes were relentless. You could, mademoiselle, and you did. The voices heard by Clara and Mrs. Finch were yours and Sir Reginald's. The cigar, half-smoked, shows he was calm until your arrival. The window, opened from inside, was your attempt to mislead. And your notebook, it contains the draft of a story Sir Reginald feared, a story that would have exposed secrets he wished to keep buried. Evelyn collapsed into her chair, her face crumpling. It wasn't supposed to happen like that, she whispered, her voice breaking. He was going to ruin me, stop my story. He threatened to sue, to destroy my career. I lost control. It was an accident. The room was silent, the weight of her confession settling like dust. Lady Beatrice stared at Evelyn, her expression a mix of shock and sorrow. Clara's sobs grew quieter, and Major Langley sat heavily, his face ashen. Dr. Hargrove shook his head, muttering under his breath. Poirot nodded, his expression grave. The truth, it is painful, but it is necessary. Mademoiselle Marsh, you have committed a grave crime, but you have also unburdened your soul. The police will take you now. As Inspector Grayson, who had been summoned and stood quietly in the corner, stepped forward to escort Evelyn from the room, Hastings turned to Poirot, his voice low. Good Lord, Poirot, how did you know? The note, the voices, it all seemed so vague. Poirot's eyes twinkled faintly. The little grey cells, mon ami. They see what others miss. The handwriting, the timing, the cigar, they all pointed to Mademoiselle Marsh. Her motive was her ambition, her opportunity was the meeting, and her deception was the window. The puzzle, it is complete. As the household dispersed, the manor seemed to exhale, its secrets finally laid bare. Poirot, however, remained in the study, his gaze lingering on the open window, a silent testament to the truth he had uncovered. Chapter 11. The Reflection. The morning after Evelyn Marsh's confession dawned clear and bright over Eldridge Manor. the sunlight streaming through the tall windows, as if to cleanse the shadows of the previous night. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of dew-soaked grass and the distant promise of autumn. Inside, however, the atmosphere remained heavy, the weight of the revealed truth settling over the household like a lingering fog. The drawing-room, where Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings now sat, was quiet, its opulent furnishings seeming muted in the wake of the tragedy. Poirot, seated in a high-backed armchair, sipped a tisane prepared by Mrs. Finch, his small hands cradling the delicate porcelain cup with characteristic precision. His moustache was as immaculate as ever, but his dark eyes held a reflective glint, as if he were turning over the events of the case in his mind, arranging them like pieces of a puzzle now complete. Hastings, opposite him, fidgeted with his cufflinks, his expression a mix of relief and lingering unease. "I say, Poirot," Hastings began, breaking the silence, "you've done it again. Pulled the rabbit out of the hat, as it were. But I'll admit, I'm still reeling. Evelyn Marsh, a murderer. I thought she was just a nosy journalist." Poirot set down his cup, his lips curving in a faint, melancholic smile. "Mon ami, the human heart, it is a complex thing. Mademoiselle Marsh was not merely a journalist, but a woman driven by ambition, by the need to prove herself. Her desire for a story, it consumed her, and when Sir Reginald threatened to destroy her work, she acted in a moment of passion. It is a tragedy, not only for Sir Reginald, but for her as well." Hastings shook his head, leaning forward. "But how did you piece it all together, Poirot? The note, the window, the voices, it all seemed so tangled. I was half convinced it was Major Langley, what with his arguments with Sir Reginald." Poirot's eyes twinkled, though his expression remained serious. "The little grey cells, Hastings, they work where others falter. The note, 'Meet me at 9:45 urgent,' was the first clue. Its handwriting, it matched the samples of Mademoiselle Marsh's writing I obtained from her notebook. The police confirmed this, though they overlooked it in their haste to call it suicide. The voices heard by Mademoiselle Clara and Mrs. Finch, they pointed to a woman, and Clara's description, soft, urgent, fit Evelyn's manner. The cigar, half-smoked, showed Sir Reginald was calm until the moment of confrontation, and the window, open yet unmarked, was the final piece, a deception to suggest an intruder, when in truth the killer never left the manor. Hastings nodded slowly, his brow furrowed. "And the 'forgive me' note? That was her doing too?" "Oui," Poirot said, his voice soft. "A clever touch, meant to seal the illusion of suicide, but it was too perfect, too theatrical. Sir Reginald, he was not a man to leave such a note. His pride, his ambition, they would not permit it. Mademoiselle Marsh, she underestimated the power of the details." The door opened, and Lady Beatrice entered, her face pale but composed. She wore a simple black dress, her mourning attire a stark contrast to the vibrant woman who had presided over the manor's dinners. She paused, her eyes meeting Poirot's with a mix of gratitude and sorrow. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice steady but low, "I owe you my thanks. You have brought clarity to this terrible affair, though the truth is painful. I never imagined Miss Marsh capable of such an act." Poirot rose, bowing slightly. "Lady Beatrice, the truth, it is often painful, but it is necessary. Your husband, he was a man of vision, but vision can breed enemies. Mademoiselle Marsh acted out of fear for her future, but her actions have consequences. I am sorry for your loss." Lady Beatrice nodded, her lips trembling slightly. And Clara, she is devastated. She feels guilty for not speaking sooner about the voices she heard. I hope you do not judge her too harshly. Poirot's expression softened. Mademoiselle Clara's silence was born of fear, not malice. She is young, and the heart of youth is easily swayed by emotion. She will heal in time. As Lady Beatrice left, Hastings leaned closer, his voice low. "What about the others, Poirot? Langley, Hargrove, they all had their secrets. Were they entirely innocent?" Poirot's moustache twitched. Innocent, perhaps, but not without fault. Major Langley, he hid his financial disputes with Sir Reginald, fearing suspicion. Dr. Hargrove, he concealed a debt that Sir Reginald had refused to pay, a matter of pride. Even Lady Beatrice, she kept silent about the strain in her marriage. Each had their secrets, but only Mademoiselle Marsh crossed the line into murder. He rose, adjusting his lapels with a precise gesture. "The case, it is closed, mon ami. But it reminds us of a truth. The human soul, it is fragile, easily swayed by greed, fear, or ambition. Hercule Poirot, he does not judge, but he observes us, and in observation, he finds justice." Hastings stood, following Poirot to the hall, where their bags were packed and waiting. "You're a marvel, Poirot. I don't know how you do it, but you always get to the heart of things." Poirot's smile was modest but proud. "It is the method, Hastings, the order and method of the little grey cells. They see what others miss, and they do not rest until the truth is revealed." As they stepped outside, the manor loomed behind them, its stone facade both grand and sombre. The car that would take them back to London waited on the gravel drive, its engine purring softly. Poirot paused, casting a final glance at Eldridge Manor, its secrets now laid bare. "Come, Hastings," he said, his voice lightening. "The world, it has many puzzles, and we must be ready for the next." As the car pulled away, the manor receded into the distance, its silhouette fading against the morning sky. For Hercule Poirot, the case of Sir Reginald Eldridge was complete, but the quiet satisfaction of a puzzle solved was tempered by the knowledge that human nature, with all its complexities, would always provide new mysteries to unravel. Chapter 12. The Aftermath. The midday sun hung high over Eldridge Manor, its light filtering through the ancient oaks that lined the estate, casting dappled shadows on the gravel drive. The manor, once a bastion of grandeur, now seemed to carry a quiet melancholy, as if mourning not only Sir Reginald Eldridge, but the secrets that had unravelled within its walls. Inside, the household was subdued, the echoes of Evelyn Marsh's confession still reverberating through the corridors. Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings, preparing to depart for London, lingered in the library, where the air was thick with the scent of old leather and the weight of recent events. Poirot stood by a tall bookshelf, his small, meticulous figure framed by the rows of dusty tomes. He was examining a volume of local history, his fingers tracing the spine as if seeking one final clue, though the case was closed. Hastings, seated at a reading table, fidgeted with his hat, his expression a mix of relief and lingering disquiet. "Say, Poirot," Hastings began, breaking the silence, "it's all over now, but I can't help feeling there's more to this than we've seen. Evelyn's confession. It was so sudden, so complete. Do you think she acted alone?" Poirot closed the book with a soft snap, turning to face his friend. His dark eyes gleamed with their usual intensity, tempered by a hint of weariness. Mon ami, you are troubled by the neatness of the solution, oui? It is a natural instinct, but in this case, the truth is clear. Mademoiselle Marsh confessed because the weight of her guilt, combined with the pressure of my questions, became too much. She acted alone, driven by her ambition and fear. The note, the voices, the window, all point to her and no other. Hastings leaned forward, his brow furrowed. But what about the others? Langley's financial disputes, Clara's inheritance, Lady Beatrice's strained marriage. Couldn't one of them have been involved, even indirectly? Poirot's moustache twitched in a faint smile. You seek complications where there are none, Hastings. The human heart, it is true, is a tangle of motives. Major Langley's arguments were real, but they were not murderous. Mademoiselle Clara's distress over her inheritance was genuine, but she lacked the cunning, or the courage, for such a crime. And Lady Beatrice, though her marriage was not without strain, had no reason to kill. Her grief, it is authentic. No, the threads all lead to Mademoiselle Marsh, whose ambition blinded her to the consequences of her actions. The door opened, and Mrs. Finch entered, carrying a tray with tea and biscuits. Her face, usually stern, was softened by a look of gratitude. Monsieur Poirot, Captain Hastings, she said, setting the tray down. I wanted to thank you before you go. The manor's been turned upside down, but you've brought us peace in a way. Knowing the truth, it's better than wondering. Poirot inclined his head, his expression courteous. Madame Finch, your assistance was invaluable. The voices you heard, though faint, were a key to unlocking the truth. You have my thanks. Mrs. Finch hesitated, her hands smoothing her apron. It's a sad business, sir. Miss Marsh seemed such a bright young thing. To think she could do such a thing. The human soul, it is complex, Poirot said softly. Ambition, it can drive us to great heights or plunge us into darkness. Mademoiselle Marsh chose the latter, but we must not judge too harshly. We must understand. As Mrs. Finch left, Clara Eldridge appeared at the door, her face pale, but her eyes clearer than they had been since the tragedy. She clutched a small book, not unlike Evelyn's notebook, and approached Poirot with hesitant steps. Monsieur Poirot, she said, her voice trembling slightly, I wanted to apologize for not speaking sooner about the voices. I was so afraid, and I thought no one would believe me. Poirot's expression softened, and he gestured for her to sit. Mademoiselle Clara, your fear was natural. The truth, it is a heavy burden, but you carried it bravely in the end. Your uncle, he would be proud of your courage. Clara's eyes filled with tears, but she managed a small smile. Thank you. I just wish I could have stopped it somehow. If I'd gone into the study, maybe. Poirot raised a hand, his voice gentle but firm. Non, mademoiselle. The past, it cannot be changed. But the truth, it sets us free to move forward. You must now look to your future with the strength you have shown. Clara nodded, clutching her book tightly as she rose. I'll try. Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. As she left, Hastings shook his head. Poor girl. She's been through the ringer. Do you think she'll be all right? In time, oui, Poirot replied, his gaze drifting to the window, where the sun illuminated the distant woods. The young, they're resilient. And the manor, it will heal, as will its people. The sound of footsteps announced the arrival of Major Langley, his military bearing as stiff as ever, though his face showed signs of strain. Monsieur Poirot, he said, nodding curtly. "I owe you an apology. I was resistant to your methods, but you've done right by Sir Reginald. I misjudged you." Poirot's smile was gracious. "Major, your loyalty to your friend was admirable. It is not easy to face the truth when it challenges what we believe. You acted as a friend should." Langley's jaw relaxed slightly, and he extended a hand, which Poirot shook with a firm grip. "Safe travels, Poirot. And you, Hastings, the Manor won't forget what you've done." As Langley departed, Poirot turned to Hastings, his expression thoughtful. "The case, it is closed, mon ami, but it leaves its mark. Each person here, they carry a piece of this tragedy. For Mademoiselle Marsh, it is the weight of her crime. For the others, it is the loss of a man they loved, or respected, or feared. And for us, it is a reminder of the fragility of human nature." Hastings stood, picking up his hat. "You're right, Poirot. It's a grim business, but you've brought order to it, as always. Shall we head to the station?" Poirot nodded, adjusting his coat with a precise gesture. "Oui, Hastings. The train awaits, and London calls. But first, let us take one last look at Eldridge Manor. It is a place of beauty and sorrow, and it has taught us much." They stepped outside, the gravel crunching under their feet as they approached the waiting car. The manor loomed behind them, its stone facade catching the sunlight, its windows reflecting the world beyond. Poirot paused, his gaze lingering on the open window of the study, now closed, a silent testament to the truth he had uncovered. "The world, it is full of puzzles," Poirot said, almost to himself. "And Hercule Poirot, he will always seek their solutions, for in truth, there is justice." As the car pulled away, the manor receded into the distance, its secrets laid bare, its wounds beginning to heal. For Poirot and Hastings, the journey back to London was not just a return to routine, but a moment to reflect on the delicate balance of human motives and the relentless pursuit of truth that defined their work. Chapter 13. The Unseen Shadow. The train to London rattled along the tracks, its rhythmic clatter a soothing counterpoint to the turmoil that had consumed Eldridge Manor. Hercule Poirot sat in a first-class compartment, his small, immaculate figure framed by the plush velvet seat, his hands folded neatly over his walking stick. Opposite him, Captain Hastings stared out the window, watching the countryside blur past, his mind still entangled in the events of the past days. The resolution of Sir Reginald Eldridge's murder had brought closure, yet a faint unease lingered in Hastings's thoughts, like a shadow just out of sight. "Poirot," Hastings said, turning from the window, "I know you've wrapped up the case, and Evelyn's confession was clear as day, but something's nagging at me. It all feels too tidy. Could there be more we've missed? Some loose end?" Poirot's dark eyes gleamed with a familiar spark, though his expression remained serene. "Mon ami, your instincts, they are improving. You sense the unseen shadow, the ripple in the pond that suggests a stone has been thrown, even if we do not see it. But rest assured, the case of Sir Reginald Eldridge is solved. Mademoiselle Marsh's guilt is certain. Her motive, her opportunity, her handwriting on the note, all align perfectly. Yet you are right to feel the shadow. There is always more beneath the surface." Hastings frowned, leaning forward. "What do you mean, Poirot? Are you saying someone else was involved?" Poirot raised a hand, his voice calm but deliberate. "Not involved in the act of murder, no. Evelyn Marsh pulled the trigger. Of that I have no doubt. But the currents of human nature, they run deep. The secrets of Eldridge Manor did not begin with Sir Reginald's death, nor do they end with Mademoiselle Marsh's confession. There are other truths, smaller perhaps, but no less significant, that linger in the background. He leaned back, his fingers tapping lightly on the head of his stick. Consider, Hastings, the motives we uncovered. Major Langley's financial disputes, Clara's threatened inheritance, Lady Beatrice's strained marriage, Dr. Hargrove's unpaid debts. These were not the cause of the murder, but they were sparks that could have ignited other fires. Each person in that manor carried a burden, a secret that shaped their actions. And sometimes it is the weight of these secrets that creates the conditions for tragedy. Hastings's brow furrowed deeper. So you think someone else knew what Evelyn was planning? Or helped her, even indirectly? Poirot's moustache twitched. In a faint smile. Not quite, mon ami, but let us reflect. Mademoiselle Marsh's ambition was her own, but it was fueled by the environment of the manor, by Sir Reginald's secrecy, by the tensions among the household. Someone, perhaps, knew more than they said. Someone heard the argument in the study and chose to remain silent, not out of malice, but out of fear or loyalty. Hastings's eyes widened. Clara! She admitted to hearing voices, but didn't speak up right away. Do you think she suspected Evelyn? Poirot nodded slowly. Mademoiselle Clara, she is young and emotional, but she is not without perception. Her hesitation to speak of the voices suggests she feared what they implied. Perhaps she saw Mademoiselle Marsh near the study, or heard more than she admitted. But her silence protected no one. It merely delayed the truth. He paused, his gaze drifting to the passing landscape. And then there is Lady Beatrice. Her composure, it was admirable, but it hid a deeper pain. Her marriage to Sir Reginald was strained, not by infidelity, but by ambition, his relentless pursuit of the manor's restoration, which left little room for her. Did she suspect Mademoiselle Marsh's intentions? Perhaps not. But she knew her husband's secrets, and she chose to guard them, even in death. Hastings shook his head, his voice tinged with frustration. It's maddening, Poirot. Everyone in that manor had something to hide, but only Evelyn crossed the line. Why did she do it? A story doesn't seem worth a man's life. Poirot's expression grew solemn. To Mademoiselle Marsh, it was not just a story. It was her future, her identity. Sir Reginald's threat to suppress her work, to ruin her career, was a blow to her very being. In that moment of rage, she saw no other path. It is a reminder, Hastings, that the smallest spark can ignite the greatest fire when the heart is consumed by passion. The train whistle sounded, signalling their approach to a station, and Poirot adjusted his coat with a precise gesture. The case, it is closed, but the lessons remain. We must always look beyond the surface, for it is in the unseen shadows that the truth often hides. The little grey cells, they do not rest, even when the puzzle is solved. Hastings leaned back, his unease not fully dispelled but tempered by Poirot's certainty. You're right, of course. But I'll be glad to get back to London, away from all this intrigue. A quiet evening at the club sounds just the thing. Poirot's smile was indulgent. Oui, mon ami. A quiet evening, it is a fine reward. But for Hercule Poirot, the mind, it is always alert, always seeking the next puzzle, The world, it is never without its mysteries. As the train pulled into the station, the compartment filled with the bustle of passengers preparing to disembark. Poirot and Hastings gathered their belongings, stepping onto the platform under a sky now tinged with the colours of dusk. Their case of Eldridge Manor was behind them, but its echoes lingered, a reminder of the delicate balance between truth and deception, and the relentless pursuit of justice that defined Poirot's life. Chapter 14. The Final Threads. The London evening was cool and damp, the streets glistening under the soft glow of gas lamps, as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings made their way from the station to Poirot's flat. The city's bustle was a stark contrast to the oppressive silence of Eldridge Manor, yet the case lingered in their minds, its complexities like a melody that refused to fade. Inside the flat, the fire crackled warmly, casting flickering shadows on the polished furniture. Poirot, ever meticulous, arranged his coat and hat with precision, before settling into an armchair, a glass of sirop de cassis in hand. Hastings, sprawled in a chair opposite, stared into the fire, his expression thoughtful. "Poirot," he said at last, breaking the comfortable silence, "I know you're satisfied with the solution to the Eldridge case, but I can't shake the feeling that we've left something unresolved. It's like there's a loose thread we didn't pull." Poirot's dark eyes twinkled, his moustache curving in a faint smile. "Mon ami, your instincts, they grow sharper with each case. You sense the final threads, the small details that linger in the mind even after the puzzle is complete. Very well. Let us examine these threads, for Hercule Poirot, he does not leave a case unfinished." He leaned forward, his fingers steepled before him. The murder of Sir Reginald Eldridge, it was solved. Mademoiselle Evelyn Marsh confessed, her motive rooted in ambition, her method revealed by the note, the voices, and the open window. But you are right to feel the shadow of something more. Let us consider what remains. Hastings nodded eagerly, his curiosity piqued. Exactly. What about the other secrets in the manor? Clara's hesitation, Langley's arguments, Hargrove's debts. Were they just distractions, or did they play a bigger role? Poirot sipped his syrup, his gaze distant but sharp. They were not distractions, Hastings, but part of the tapestry. Each secret, each motive, created the environment in which Mademoiselle Marsh's crime could flourish. Let us begin with Mademoiselle Clara. Her delay in speaking of the voices she heard was not mere fear, but a loyalty to the manor, to her uncle's memory. She suspected perhaps that the truth would tarnish the Eldridge name. Her silence, it was a shield, but a fragile one. Hastings frowned. So you think she knew more than she let on? Maybe not about Evelyn specifically, but about the tensions in the household. Précisément, Poirot said, his voice soft. Clara, she is young, but she is observant. She heard the argument, and though she could not identify the woman's voice with certainty, she sensed its importance. Her guilt, it was not for the crime, but for failing to act sooner. This is a thread that needs no further pulling. It is resolved in her confession. Poirot set down his glass, his expression growing more serious. Then there is Major Langley. His disputes with Sir Reginald were financial, yes, but also personal. As solicitor, he felt a duty to protect the estate, but Sir Reginald's reckless investments threatened his own reputation. Did he know of Mademoiselle Marsh's intentions? No, but his silence about the full extent of their arguments was a form of self-preservation. He feared suspicion would fall on him, and so he deflected toward Clara's inheritance. This, too, is a thread that leads nowhere further. Hastings leaned back, his brow still furrowed. And Dr. Hargrove? His debts, surely they gave him a motive, even if he wasn't in the study. Poirot's moustache twitched. The good doctor, he is a man of pride, but not of violence. His debts to Sir Reginald were a source of shame, and his absence from the manor at 9:45 is confirmed by his patient, Mrs. Carter. But his irritability, his evasiveness, these were signs of a man hiding his financial troubles. He did not kill, but he carried a burden that made him wary of scrutiny. Another thread tied off. Hastings's eyes narrowed. And Lady Beatrice? Her marriage wasn't what it seemed. Could she have known about Evelyn's plans, or suspected something? Poirot nodded slowly, his gaze drifting to the fire. Lady Beatrice, she is the most complex thread. Her marriage to Sir Reginald was strained, not by love lost, but by ambition. His for the manor's restoration, hers for a life of stability. She knew her husband's secrets, perhaps even his concerns about Mademoiselle Marsh's story. Did she suspect murder? Perhaps in her heart she sensed the truth, but her loyalty to Sir Reginald and the manor kept her silent. Her composure, it was her armour. This thread, it does not lead to guilt, but to understanding. Hastings sighed, running a hand through his hair. So that's it then. Everyone had their secrets, but Evelyn acted alone. No accomplices, no conspiracy. Oui, mon ami, Poirot said, his voice firm but gentle. The murder, it was a solitary act, born of a moment of desperation. But the manor, it was a crucible of secrets, each one feeding the tension that led to the crime. The final threads, they are not loose ends, but part of the whole. A reminder that no crime exists in isolation. The little grey cells, they see the connections, the patterns, even when they are not the key to the crime itself. Hastings smiled, his unease finally easing. You've got a way of making even the shadows clear, Poirot. I suppose I just wanted to be sure we hadn't missed anything. Poirot's smile was warm, though his eyes held a trace of melancholy. You are a good friend, Hastings, always seeking the light. But sometimes the shadows, they are part of the truth. The case of Eldridge, Manor, it is complete, but it teaches us that human nature, it is never simple. We must always look deeper, always question for the truth. It is a delicate thing. The fire crackled softly, and Poirot rose, adjusting his cuffs with a precise gesture. Come, mon ami, let us dine. A good meal, it restores the soul, and tomorrow we shall face whatever new puzzles the world brings. As they left the flat, the city's lights twinkled against the evening sky, a reminder that life, with all its mysteries, continued beyond the walls of Eldridge Manor. For Poirot, the case was a chapter closed, but the pursuit of truth remained an eternal quest, one he would meet with his unerring little grey cells. Chapter 15. The Departure. The London morning was crisp, with a faint haze softening the outlines of the city's spires and chimneys. Hercule Poirot's flat, a haven of order and elegance, was bathed in the gentle light filtering through its tall windows. The detective stood by his desk, meticulously arranging a stack of papers, his small, precise movements a testament to his unwavering need for symmetry. Captain Hastings, seated in an armchair by the fire, sipped a cup of tea, his gaze drifting to the window where the bustle of the city seemed a world away from the sombre events of Eldridge Manor. Poirot? Hastings said, setting down his cup. "I've been thinking about the Eldridge case all night. You tied up every loose end as always, but it's left me with a queer feeling. All those secrets, all that tension. Do you think the manor will ever be the same?" Poirot paused, his fingers lingering on a letter opener shaped like a miniature sword. His dark eyes gleamed with a reflective intensity, and his moustache twitched in a faint philosophical smile. "Mon ami, Eldridge Manor. It is a place of stone and history, but also of human hearts. The secrets we uncovered, they have left their mark, but time, it heals even the deepest wounds. The manor will endure, as will its people, though they carry the scars of truth." Hastings nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I suppose you're right. Clara will inherit, Lady Beatrix will carry on, and Langley and Hargrove will go back to their lives. But Evelyn Marsh, what a waste! A brilliant young woman, ruined by one moment of madness." Poirot turned, his voice soft but firm. "It is not madness, Hastings, but passion misdirected. Mademoiselle Marsh, she sought glory through her pen, but when Sir Reginald threatened her ambition, she chose a path of destruction. It is a lesson, non? The pursuit of truth, it must be tempered by wisdom, or it becomes a weapon." He moved to the window, his gaze sweeping over the city. "The case, it is complete, but it reminds us of the fragility of the human soul. Each person in that manor, Clara with her loyalty, Lady Beatrice with her pride, Major Langley with his duty, Dr. Hargrove with his shame, they all played their part in the tapestry of tragedy, but only Mademoiselle Marsh wove the fatal thread." Hastings rose, joining Poirot at the window. "You make it sound almost poetic, Poirot. But I'll admit, I'm glad to be back in London, away from all that gloom. A quiet day at the club, a round of golf, that's what I need." Poirot's smile was indulgent. "Oui, mon ami, you seek the simple pleasures, and they are well deserved. But for Hercule Poirot, the mind it does not rest. The world, it is full of puzzles, and each one calls to the little grey cells." A knock at the door interrupted them, and Poirot's housekeeper, Miss Lemon, entered with a telegram. "For you, Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice brisk but respectful. "It arrived just this morning." Poirot took the telegram, his eyes scanning the brief message. His expression remained unreadable, but a spark of interest flickered in his gaze. "Most intriguing," he murmured, folding the paper and slipping it into his pocket. Hastings raised an eyebrow. "Another case, Poirot? Don't tell me we're off again already." Poirot's moustache twitched with a hint of mischief. "Perhaps, Hastings, perhaps. But for now, let us enjoy the moment. The truth, it has been served at Eldridge Manor, and justice, it has been done. The next puzzle, it will wait, at least until after lunch." Hastings chuckled, shaking his head. "You're incorrigible, Poirot, but I wouldn't have it any other way." They stepped out into the bustling London street, the city alive with the hum of life, cabs rattling, vendors calling, and the distant chime of a church bell. Eldridge Manor was behind them, its secrets laid bare, its tragedy resolved. For Poirot, the case was a chapter closed, but the world, with its endless mysteries, stretched before him. A canvas waiting for the brush of his little grey cells. As they walked toward the club, the sun broke through the haze, casting a warm glow over the city. Poirot's step was light, his mind already turning to the next challenge, while Hastings, ever his loyal companion, followed, ready for whatever puzzle lay ahead. The story of Eldridge Manor had ended, but the pursuit of truth for Hercule Poirot was a journey without end.